Where were you living at that time?
Oh, I was here in Salt Lake.
Oh.
I was in Salt Lake, yeah. I had no idea that Christopher or anybody was in Salt Lake. I had no idea. I just knew about the book, and that's about it. We actually lived and traveled in an RV for the last 7 years. My son basically grew up in that RV. We had a 30-foot RV, and we would travel and do video production work anywhere. So we were totally mobile. We never really had an address. We were like gypsies, really, to be honest. And we're sitting over there, and my father passes away. And just before my father passes away, about 2 years prior to that, it'd be about 4 years prior to that, my mother got a divorce from my father. You know what I mean? And we were raised in the church. They were very, very active. My father was one of the first. He's Japanese, but he was born in Brazil in, back a long time ago. You know what I mean? Back in the 30s, 40s, you know. And so my mother, she comes from a German background, and her father went out there to build, chapels in the temple out there in Brazil. And he was in a branch, and they both met up and everything, and they were like 9 years apart, really, at the time. In fact, my dad always tells a story that when he was, kind of like the president or one of the first counselors of the branch, that my mom was like a little girl, really. He'd pat her on the head. And it wasn't until years later, when she was like 17, 18, that they wanted to get married, And when he went to get married to her, the church wouldn't allow that. There's a guy named Bengeter out here, and he was the governor also, but he was in charge of that mission. And at the time, interracial marriages were really frowned upon. You know what I mean? Him being Japanese, her being white, is like, oh no, I can't condone this, you can't do this. The church won't allow you to do that because it's called the miscegenation law that they had in America. So they wanted to come back to America because she's from here, and so they ended up getting married in Nogales, Mexico, and then we ended up here in Utah. We've always been like really active, and throughout my whole life, we became kind of like a little family band. You know what I mean? So that's where we kind of grew up, because we were right in the middle of here. It was like the Jackson 5, it was the Osmonds, you know what I mean? And so me and my brother and my sister, we grew up like doing this family band thing for the longest time, till I was like out of high school. And then I decided to go on a mission. I went on my mission to Hawaii, and that was a good experience. I had all those things, but I've always had questions. My father was always good at saying, hey, just remember what Joseph Smith said. He always said, no man knows my history. He always says, hey, if I told you everything, people rise up and come. So that's always been in the back of my mind. You know what I mean? And I always knew about the sealed portion. I always knew that something would, come up in the future that would explain the whole entire thing. And I always thought, well, maybe it might be in the millennium, maybe it might be whenever we're ready for it, because it says so. And that's that, So now that I'm sitting here doing this radio show, we start doing it on Sundays. So now I moved into my father's ward, because this is the first ward that we actually went into. Prior to that, we were in our RV, and we parked downtown, so we would go to this church in Salt Lake City. And that's where, I talked to my wife. Once my father passed away, before my father passed away, we had no idea that he was going to pass away. We wanted to get married in the temple. Because, unfortunately, my mother and my father got a divorce. And I started getting a lot of questions, because my mom married this other guy right away. He was he's like one of the brothers that was fixing our house, doing remodeling in our home. There's a guy, and apparently he was from the ward, and apparently he introduced his brother to my mom, and all of a sudden she wants to get married to this guy. I'm like, what is going on? This is so bizarre, And my mom is probably one of the most strong. I mean, she's so strong, LDS. You know what I mean? And then just to see her like one day to say, okay, I'm getting divorced, and I want to make sure I get a temple divorce, and I want to be with this other guy. And my dad handled it actually really, really well. He said, I still love your mom, and I like this. I don't want to get divorced, but what can I do? And so I went through this whole thing where I just like I think that's really what started me to question. It's like, okay, what happens now that if you're sealed in the temple, and we've always grown up to be this close family, and all of a sudden now she's divorced. How does all that work? With the temple and all that. I started questioning quite a bit. Like, how does that work? And then I would go to the bishop. I go to the people. I'd say, how does this work? I'd ask these questions in church. How does this work when someone gets divorced? And no one can answer that question. Yeah. Absolutely nobody can. And so anyway, my wife and I, we I'd been to the temple prior to 1990, so I remember those penalties, and I remember all those things, you know what I mean? And I was actually shocked when I came back and it was gone, and they took it out, and I thought, what? How was that done? And that always confused me. I asked questions people could never answer, Anyway, I took my wife through, and she went through the temple, and I sealed, and my son went through there, and that was really cool. And my whole family's there waiting for Laura on the other side of the veil. She comes through, and I can tell by my wife she was completely blown away, completely confused. But everyone's like, "Hey, how was it? All right, And she just couldn't. Oh, it's funny. My mom's calling me for the first time on Skype. That never happens. That's odd. Look at that.
You want to talk to her and call me?
No. I'll give her a call back. I just thought it was so odd that, I'm talking about her and she's calling me.
Oh, right.
So, but, this whole time, we get to, and then 3 weeks later after we went through the temple, my father finally, got his temple recommend again. He went through the temple with us. We were all there. It was like a great feeling, And then 3 weeks later, he dies on Easter. Peaceful, in his bed. And he always told me, I think he was always kind of ready to go, because he always said, hey, I did everything I did in life, He wasn't sick. He was nothing. He was an artist. He taught in his home. And he says, just remember this, live with peace, treat your fellow man good, and just find peace in your life, And that's what I remember. And that really threw me down with all kinds of questions. So we're now we sold our RV. We had to get rid of our RV because my father has this condo here, and we moved in the condo, but we had to fix it all up. But in the meantime, we're doing this Best Deals Utah thing, and each week, we're doing the thing. No phone calls, no nothing. All of a sudden, the show that was on there prior to ours cancels. She moves to another radio station. And what she used to do, she used to be the owner of the radio station, but she sold it. And the current people that owns it, I'm really, really good friends with. And they called me up and said, hey, will you take the hour prior to your show? She used to talk about spiritual things, and you don't have to only stay on the Mormon topic, but you can go off on, spirituality and these people that are New Age healers and things like that. You can interview anybody as long as it's a kind of spiritual nature to the show. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And so we took the show and we started interviewing different people. And for some reason, I went back and I wanted to look at the sealed portion thing again. You know what I mean? And I didn't really have any plans of like interviewing them on a show or anything. It just something inspired me to go back and look. This time when I went back to look, all of a sudden they have the website. They have all these books. I'm like, what the heck is going on? I didn't see this Sacred Not Secret book. I didn't see Joseph Smith's book. I didn't see any of these books. I only thought the sealed portion was available. And then I started seeing who the guy was. I started seeing his YouTube symposium. and the people that challenged him. I seen that he had his own website that, Harry DeShack made that was against him. I read all that. I went through the whole entire thing because I wanted to find out who this guy was. You know what I mean? Because in one hand, it was so enthralling, stuff he was writing, but then on the other hand, they had so many critics and so, so what is this going on? And so I went through the whole thing, read the whole thing. I was very, very impressed. But then, the first book I downloaded right away was Sacred Not Secret, to talk about the temple, because I had all those questions. Man, when I read that, I couldn't sleep. I read that. I think I was a zombie because I wanted to read the whole thing, that fast. And my wife kept looking at me like, what the heck's going on? Why are you beating your head against the pillow, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this, and she had no idea, really. I go, man, I've got to read these other books. So I downloaded a lot of the other books, Human Reality, and I started listening to the Human Reality video on YouTube, and it made a lot of sense. And I told Laura, I said, hey, you know what? We're going to play this Human Reality show. I'm not going to let anyone know that. I'm not going to do the sealed portion because I don't want to be too biased that way, but I really like what Human Reality is talking about in his presentations. Very clear, very new age, very, very, the average person could probably kind of understand a little better. So I'll play this on a radio show. And that's what I did. When we had our first radio show with that format, later on, I ended up playing the first hour of his thing. And then when I started playing it, all of a sudden people started calling in. And we never had calls before. I thought nobody really listened to the show, And then all these people started calling in and asking, who's this? And what book is this? And what is this? And I saw that there was interest. And come to find out, it was when I played this on our radio station, it was on June 16th last year. Apparently on the MWAW, symposium days that Christopher does these symposiums, And I had no idea.
Oh, that's a bit of a coincidence.
Yeah, it was a huge coincidence. And it wasn't until even later that I even realized the date of it all. So what I did is I went back, I started reading all these things, and I started seeing that the grave. I started reading about that there's a headstone in Ida Smith, and I read the City Weekly article, and that he claims that he's Hiram Smith reincarnated, and I started thinking, oh man, this is starting to get a little deep. This is weird. I don't know if I can, this is I know the concept of reincarnation, but we don't believe in it. You know what I mean? So, and being Hiram Smith, I thought, oh, now you're starting to lose me here. So I told my wife, I go, well, I got to go and take a look at this gravestone marker, and it was the very next week that I went in there, and she goes, how are you going to find it? I go, I don't know. We're just going to look for it, And so we went into the Salt Lake City Cemetery, and we drove almost right to it. I mean, it was crazy. It was right there, smack in the middle of the Smith Cemetery, and it's right there, easiest place to find. And I thought, this is crazy. And I remember taking a picture with my little boy there, and he's pretending like he's holding the gold plates on the grave. And I just couldn't get any of this out of my mind for all these weeks. I'm like, this is crazy, because even though I have these doubts in my head, when I go and read the books make so much sense. And then I'll listen to him, and then he makes so much common sense. And I think maybe he just makes so much sense because he just can make it in a common sense way, and he just doesn't have any real fluff to it, where everybody tries to. And so I was just enthralled. And so anyway, I came back and I wrote to the Marvelous Work and Wonder website, thinking, well, maybe I can get him on the radio, and interview him. I'd love to interview him. And that time, I think John Rowe's the one that takes care of the Marvelous Work and Wonder website, and I didn't expect much when I wrote. I just kind of, okay, I'll write, and if something comes out, great. If not, but that night, I remember them getting back and saying, "Sure, would you like Christopher on your show?" And like, yeah. He goes, "Okay. Are you sure?" And like, yeah, I do. And so we set up a thing where he would come on his show, and then I called him on his show the first time he was doing his on Blog Talk Radio, and we had a little conversation the first time. And I remember him telling me, you know that what I do, and he says, my perspective is going to be very, very controversial. Are you okay with that? And I said, sure, of course I'm okay with it, as long as we can make it. As long as I'll give it up to you and you explain yourself, because I want to actually learn the most. And that's the only way that I was actually being selfish, to be honest. I was the one that wanted to personally meet him, to personally hear how he was, to look at him, look at his mannerisms, look at his demeanor. You know what I mean? Because when you hang around somebody for a while, you end up knowing what their flaws are. You know what their strengths are. You know quite a bit about somebody when you see them face to face, and not just at church. Because you can go to church and see the same person week after week, but in a church setting, you never see their true selves. You know what I mean? And so I invited him onto our show, and when we did the show, it was the first time that people actually started calling in. And people start asking questions. I remember the lady calling in and being kind of just bearing her testimony, really. And I started seeing other people that were, interested. I go, man, this is the first time we've ever had any phone calls. This is crazy. So I'm going to let this guy take my full 3 hours, and you can talk about this, And it was so good that I said, hey, look, we have this hour that we're taking over. But what if I was able to get you a show, and you were to get that hour before our show? And he told me, you know what, if you could, that'd be great, and I would do it. But I'm going to tell you, now it won't happen. I'm like, no, it will. I know these guys so well. And he goes, listen, if you can do it, I'll pay the station 2 years in advance for that time. And I'm like, wow, 2 years in advance. I knew the radio station was struggling. And I thought, and the radio and the TV always said, hey, if you bring somebody, you get this commission. You know what I mean? And at that time I said, I don't even want the commission. I just want this guy to be on the radio, because I like what he's saying. I forget the commission. You can have the commission, keep the commission. And so I went in there, talked to the owners of the radio station. They've been around for a long time, actually, and good people. I love those guys. Even till today, I talk to them, And I talked to him. I said, hey, there's this guy named Christopher Nemelka. He has a sealed portion. He's got this, but he'd like to do that. And he says, well, would you be able to produce his hour for him? I said, sure. I'd be the producer. I've been, answering the phone calls, producing the show. And then they'll pay you 2 years in advance. And they were, man, when I told them that, they were so excited. It would have been like $32,000 that they would have made, just on that day. That Christopher said, I'll pay that in full. And we had a meeting a couple days later where Christopher came down. Christopher explained everything to him in saying, gave him the check, but they were so enthralled by the check. They were saying, wow, thank you. And he even had his daughter, the manager of the station, go and cash a check right away. During the time while we were still in the meeting. And he says, my thing could be kind of controversial, because everything I say is going to be, I don't think the LDS Church is going to like it too much. And they're saying, well, you know what, we're pretty open. We're talk radio. We're the Utah's first voice.
Is this very different? This is something else.
Yeah, this is the talk radio. This is KTKK talk radio in Utah that I got him on. Same station that I introduced Christopher on.
Right.
And you'll probably see one of the episodes there where Laura's in the station with the mic. That's the place that we're talking about.
Okay.
And so they're all excited and they say, well, as long as you don't bring up the gay agenda and you don't promote that, we're good. Because the guy's a huge anti-gay, you know. He didn't want to talk about gay. And he says, that's the only thing that I will not allow you to talk on your show.
Right.
And Christopher said, well, because we have different views on the gays, but, you know, for that, I will agree. I won't say anything about the gay people, you know what I mean, on the show or promote that agenda or whatever. He says, okay, if you can do that, then I don't see any problems. However, he told him, if the church or someone comes back and says that you can't have your show, I'm going to have to let you go, you know? And he's like, okay, that's fine. And everyone's like happy. They shook hands, everything. When he left, the owner came up to me, Tony, thank you so much for like saving our station. You know, we really needed this money at this time. Thank you. We'll take you out to sushi tomorrow and do this. And are you sure you don't want your commission? And I'm like, no, I don't want my commission. You know.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, that's a lot of money. You know. And I said, well, it's okay. I was more excited just to get Christopher on there. That was my thing, because I was like, wow, I really like what I'm hearing. I like what I'm reading. I gotta be around this more. You know. And no kidding, no sooner than like 3 days later, it was like a Thursday, I started getting phone calls from his daughter. It's like, Tony, call me right away, this and that. All of a sudden, I call him back, and it says, hey, we need to talk to you personally in the office, and we'd like to have you come in here as soon as possible. I'm like, okay. I go into the office, and it felt like someone died. You know what I mean? It's like, what happened? You know, and they all looked at it and says, well, my father, the owner, just came down with stage 4, or found out that he has stage 4 lymph node cancer. And we cannot do your show with Christopher because we don't want to take 2 years in advance money, because we don't know where my dad's health is going, and we're going to have to give it back to you guys, and, you know, because we just don't want to, you know, be unfair for Christopher. We want to give his money back.
Well, in case the radio closed down or something.
Yeah, in case he sells it or something happened. I go, oh, okay, that's okay. Well, what if we did this? What if I paid you like 6 months in advance? You know what I mean? Oh, no, we can't do 6 months. Well, 3 months, or can we go month to month with a month being in advance? No. You know, right now we just don't know what's going to happen, and we'd rather just give you the money back. And
oh, they didn't know at all.
They wouldn't do the show at all. And they says, however, we'll let him, you know, we feel so bad because we promised him. We feel so bad that we'll allow him to do the show on Sunday, just as a thank you, and you know, for them to feel good about it, you know what I mean? And he said, but after that, we can't have Christopher on anymore. And I'm like, oh, okay, anymore. I understand. You know, I didn't have to ask twice. And so I called Christopher, and Christopher right away, he wasn't mad, or he was just the same old Christopher. Say, what'd I tell you? I'm like, I just couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? It's like, what? What happened, you know? And he goes, no, I told you. And I said, well, I was really bummed at the time. I said, well, maybe, yeah, because they are LDS, you know. I called another talk radio
who he actually is.
What is it?
So is it they found out who he actually is, and that's why they changed their mind?
Oh, yeah, because later on I'll tell you how that all unfolded. So all of a sudden Sunday comes around, and there's a couple guys at night that I used to work with, and they would do like a UFO show, you know what I mean? Mm. And those guys that night sabotaged the studio. No one ever unplugs the mics. No one ever unplugs the computers. No one ever takes off all the ads. And so during the time that Christopher was supposed to be on, the mics weren't working. Everything was a mess. And you can see us kind of scrambling in that episode. You can see where Christopher was at the guest, and then we had to move him to the front mic. You know what I mean? Because the front mic's always on. But the telephone calls and the connections to the board, and they turned off, these everything was off, turned off. It was like sabotage. That's all I can say. It's like, what the heck happened? And you can see us going through the hour and where the commercials are supposed to come on, no commercials at all. All the commercials are gone. It's just a pure, quiet hour. If you ever go back and revisit and watch that, you'll see it panic, and it's like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's got this in it. It's so bizarre, And since he was there, I said, well, I'm going to allow him to continue through my 2 hours. Because my 2 hours is, basically paid for anyway. So I allowed him to, since it was going to be his last time on the station, I was going to let him take the whole thing, and that's where he came up with that thing. If Joseph Smith or Jesus had a radio show and people could ask him any questions, what would they ask? And that's where he gave his whole spiel, talked about the gays. He didn't hold back, And he talked about, how the owner told him you couldn't talk about the gay agenda and things like that. He brought all that up. I'm like, oh, wow. Yikes. But anyway, that was it. And by the time our show started, then everything came back on. The radio, the ads, everything. But for that 1 hour, it was completely dark. But, we got so many phone calls that we couldn't place and get them through because the connections weren't there. And people are saying, who's this guy? And where's this guy? And what's this book? I want to read this. And we've never had so many listeners and callers call in interested in what he was saying. You know what I mean? Mm. And after that, I kind of felt bad. It's like, wow, that was sad. That was that was cool. That all this, that I was able to witness all that. But I was thinking, wow, that was odd. These owners are like night and day different. What happened? And he goes, he says, you'll be surprised what happens with this work. And I says, well, I know another company called KLO. They're even a bigger company. They have FM, because you guys are just a little AM local radio here. And my whole thing is we came up with this technology where I can stream, not through live stream, but really through Wirecast. And anywhere I would go, I would actually produce a lot of these bands, you know what I mean? And give them time on TV on the TV station, because I could go to these places and stream their concerts and stream talent shows and these things. And while it's going on in the event, you can also watch it on TV. You know what I mean? And that was my forte. That's what I did over here, is I would go out to these events and I'd stream them and film them, but also edit them and put them on TV at the same time that they were happening. So I went to KLO and I said, hey, this new radio station, I said, number one, are you LDS affiliated at all? And they said, no, we're not. And they're a huge talk show. They have Herman Cain, they have all these guys on there, you know what I mean, that they stream nationally. And I said, hey, look, I'd like to see about buying some time, that we could do that. He goes, well, it's pretty expensive, And we told him about talk radio. And the thing I think that happened is they said, well, you guys are on talk radio. Why are you guys coming over here now? They started asking questions. I'm like, well, and I told them up front. I said, well, we have this radio program called Marvelous Work and a Wonder that, the owner said he came down with cancer, and that was supposed to be confidential. So, otherwise I didn't know what to, I told the guy the truth. But it sounded like, I think later, that we were trying to maybe pull a fast one, if that makes sense.
No,
you know what I mean?
By that.
Because he's saying, why are you coming over here? Because they know that we paid 2 years in advance,
right, to
the other company, and they're going, and they just gave you the money back? And they go, I don't believe that. And I'm like, no, that's true. And then I had to tell him that's because he came down with, stage 4 cancer. Please don't bring that. But that's what they told us. That's the reason why they canceled the show. And he goes, no, I don't believe that for a minute. You know what I mean? He says, but we'll take your show. It says let's just do a year in advance. It'll be even more than that. So it's almost about that same price for just 1 year. And we said, okay, sure. And I called Christopher, hey, guess what? I even got you in a bigger rate. And that's when he's writing in his journal, hey, we got another place, and it could even be bigger. You know what I mean? But when I met with Christopher behind the scenes before we went into these meetings, he goes, Tony, I'm telling you, man, you think you can get me on the radio stations? I'm like number one enemy foe out here, you know what I mean? It's not going to happen. If it does, great, beautiful, I'd love it. But I'm going to tell you, it's not going to happen. I'm going, it's impossible, man. These guys, they were excited, you know. We went into that one again. He goes, hey, let me bring my dad in. He's the director of the company. And as soon as they did that, I'm like, oh no, here we go again. You know? All of a sudden we have this meeting, and they're like, well, you know, I don't know about that story about K-Talk Radio. It just doesn't make sense to us. And they're afraid by that. And then it says, you know, our license is going to be renewed this year, and by Bonneville Broadcasting. And I'm like, and Christopher asked him, he says, so let me ask you, are you LDS? And the guys go, well, yeah, we are. We are. And he goes, oh, okay. He says, because when Tony called, I said, when we called, you said you weren't affiliated with LDS. He goes, well, we just tell people that because we want people to feel like, you know, we're not going to, you know, go against them or, you know, discriminate, you know,
right. Just
because, you know, and I'm like, and so Christopher says, so basically what you're saying is you're not going to allow this show to be on because it's going to be controversial. And the guy actually said, yes, you know what, this subject is too controversial for talk radio. And that's why I use that line in the front of the opener of the too controversial to talk radio, because the guy, that was his quote.
Oh, right.
You know? And they shook hands and, sorry, we can't do that. And Christopher was always I was looking, he's always nice and smiling and, hey, no problem, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like he was.
Yeah, he already expected it. And then, I mean, I was the one kind of like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? I was more like, you know, I was being nice, but in my heart, in my head, I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then I'm thinking, I told Christopher, okay, we got one last chance, you know what I mean, here at producing a show, because I'm the guy that runs the TV station. I'm the guy that creates all the stuff for K-Powder Channel 19. Those guys said I could have I could take any time I want and create anything I want over there, because I've shot so many things in the past for them that, you know, this whole collaboration with Best Deals Utah was between the radio station, TV station, everything. And I know the owner is not LDS at all. You know what I mean? He was married to LDS wife, and he kind of, you know, he has his own bias against the LDS people. You know what I mean? But I thought, oh, this is good. He's not going to have a problem with this at all. Well, we go over there. We tell the guy, okay, we're just going to do this show completely through the TV and the internet. You know, so while we do the TV show, we can stream it live on the internet for the entire world, and we're good. And they were all excited, you know. And so we went and started getting our backdrops and things like that. And then, right before we start, again, Christopher says, you think it's going to happen, Tony? I'm telling you, man, it's not going to happen. I'm like, no way, dude. It's because I know this. I basically run the TV station. That's how confident I was. Mm-hmm. Also, we get in there. Christopher comes in. They know he's going to do a show. Everybody is in there. Nobody's usually in there on a Sunday. On a Sunday. Actually, what happened, this is the most important story about the TV station, is the Monday that I walk in there, because we had a Saturday meeting. Oh, no, we did that one last show on K-Talk Radio on that Sunday. The very next Monday, I come into the TV station, and the TV station, as soon as I walk in there, I tell them about what happened at K-Talk Radio, because they were all excited, because they were like, wow, you know, he paid $32,000 to K-Talk Radio? And I says, yeah, and he'll also pay some money for the TV time, you know what I mean? And they were going to make money out of this TV time too, and they were ready to negotiate how much the TV time would cost, so we could stream the radio show and the TV at the same time. Well, I went in there, and they were shocked that Christopher was not on the radio anymore. And again, I mean, it looks weird. It's like, why would the radio show not take $32,000 for the show? And they started getting kind of weirded about it, you know. And there's one guy that says, I don't know, are we dealing with somebody that's like Lucifer or you know, someone that's, you know, talking bad, because we can't have someone here talking bad about the church, because we need to be supported by them, you know. I'm like, no, he doesn't talk bad about well, you just have to look at the perspective, you know what I mean, yeah. and then right then they said, hey, look, this afternoon we got this guy that we'd like you to produce, and he's a Christian guy, and he's coming over from Channel 20 because Channel 20 let him go, and he's going to come over here, and I want you to meet with him this afternoon. And I go, okay, well, what's his name? And he goes, I don't know, but I don't think he really likes LDS people either, so maybe we can do a half Christopher and half this guy's show during a certain time of, you know, day on Sunday. And you could produce both of them. And then for some reason I had this idea, and I had to tell him, I said, you know what, if it's this Shawn McCraney guy, you know, if it's this guy that you're talking about, then there's no way I can produce his show. Because if I'm doing Christopher's show, I wouldn't be able to produce this other guy's show at the same time. I wouldn't feel good about it, you know. And they're like, oh, no, it's probably another guy. It's probably not this guy that you're thinking about. And sure enough, by 1 o'clock rolls through, this guy walks through the door, and it's Shawn McCraney. And I'm like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? This is crazy. And he comes in, and they're all showing the studio, and they're, yeah, we're so excited for this guy to be on our studio because this guy's going to pay him in advance and go from Channel 20 over to this channel. And they said, this is Tony, we'd like him to produce your thing. And I go, hi, Shawn, how you doing? Hey, I recognize your show, and do you know a guy named Christopher Nemelka? And he goes, oh, yeah, that guy. And, you know, Christopher, Shawn McCraney, actually, when you know him in person, he's a pretty nice guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not as loud. He has more of a persona on his TV show than anyone does in real life. But he's like, yeah, can you believe that guy? That guy, woo, he's cuckoo. You know what I mean? And as soon as those people knew that we were talking the same thing in Christopher, they're looking at me like, are you kidding me? How could this? Number one, we were talking about Christopher earlier. This guy knows Christopher. This guy's saying that he's like Satan and Lucifer, and he's saying, no, he's like trying to bring down the Mormon church, and they're getting scared. And I tell him, well, you know, I didn't tell the guy. I said, well, hey, you know, it's just nice. Listen to the meeting, let him go. And then I told the owner, I said, hey, look, I can't do this. Sorry, you know, I won't be able to produce his. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, I understand. That's good. He goes, I can't believe that this guy had Christopher on his show. And I said, yeah, it's on the internet. You can watch it. And right when I'm talking about that, the lady from CNN Latino that brought CNN Latino to their radio station, she comes in, says hi to the guys, comes up to me and goes, you know Christopher, right? And I go, yeah, I do. She goes, I want to interview him for our CNN, for our Spanish show. They have a Spanish radio station. And I know that he can speak Spanish. But my friend, this guy that I'm dating, he's putting all this evidence against Christopher to confront him on our radio show. I'm like, oh, sure. Yeah, I'll give you his contact. I'm sure he'd be on. And I was just laughing, and because the guys at the TV station, this is the third time that same day that now another person outside of the thing, they were freaking out like, what the hell's going on? Now the sales lady that we just brought on is talking about Christopher. How does she know about Christopher and we don't? And she's talking about taking them and interviewing them on another. They were totally blown away. They were getting scared, really, you know, because there's just too much Christopher talk that one day. So when I went to go produce, you can see the first show that we did at the TV station. It's all dark. It's, you know, the lighting and everything, because the one guy brought his dog in there. The dog was running around all over the studio. He's never done that before. And all the sales guys, all the people, they were like huddled in a small little room right there so they could like watch out and watch Christopher. But they were all pretending like they were having a sales meeting on Sunday, which never ever happened. And everybody was in there, and they left the door cracked open to listen to what he was saying, tried to take calls, but everything was just a sham over there that day. It was, again, the technology didn't work. Everything I had that always worked, those guys from the radio station that also wanted to get their show on TV, it was sabotaged again. And we got people from Hawaii calling, things like that. But the owner was impressed. The actual owner that wasn't LDS, and there's the co-owner that is, he's not LDS, but there's a 2% owner that's LDS, and he's the one I found out that was giving the hardest time about having this on their radio station, on their TV station. And so, as soon as Christopher got done with that one, he goes, "Hey, Tony, I appreciate everything, but it's not going to work. None of this is going to work. So if you honestly want to, produce a show, I want you to produce a show, but we're going to do it internet only, because that's the way it needs to be." And I said, "Wow, okay, yeah, I'll do an internet show, sure." I was just so bummed that everything that I tried to work out failed, you know what I mean? And it wasn't until later on that day that he actually had Christopher there, and he said, "Hell, let me tell you what happened. Last week, some representatives of the LDS Church came to me, and they invited us up to the Zion's Bank, up to the top place where they have this, their meeting place, and they have all the pictures of all the apostles and everything, these beautiful painted things, and they had a huge thing for all the media. And we were in there, and we were invited to go up there, and they said basically this: if you allow Christopher on your station, we're not going to support your station, and we're not going to advertise or do anything with it. And since you're new in this CNN Latino thing, we can't do it. You know what I mean? And so they got all scared about that. And they go, "Well, we can't have Christopher, but then we're going to lose Tony, because Tony's the only guy that works and goes out and produces these things." And so the owner always told me, he says, "No matter what the LDS Church does," he says, I value your friendship, Tony, that you could, if you want to do his show here, I'll let you, because I promised you." And he was a really nice guy, and I know him till today. But yeah, that's pretty much. Sorry it's taken so long, but that's kind of the story of how we did it. And then Christopher just said, "Hey, we'll go build a little studio out there in Orem. Just get a little teeny place, and we'll start transmitting over the internet," because he says that's the way it needs to be, and that's the only way. And most of all this stuff was to kind of just to show you what you're up against. And I was just like, well, I'll produce those shows because I want to. Because after seeing all this and all this that's been going on, and reading all the books and everything, it makes sense to me. You know what I mean? And I don't see how most people that I talk to can have pretty open minds. You know what I mean? But I told them, yeah, I would do that, and we ended up building that place where we are. And you've got the church, you've got the FBI, you've got everybody always like listening in and outside the doors, and it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. And that's about it.
So listening in on the show?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The first day that we transmitted from the new place, you'll see the signals. You know when because you're an audio guy. You know when someone's jamming your signal.
Oh, I don't have any experience with that.
Oh, okay. Have you ever been close to where you have your cell phone next to speakers?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that kind of now if to jam a frequency or jam a thing, it'll be like that, but it'll completely jam your signal, your wireless signals, unless you're hardwired. You know what I mean? But throughout the whole time is like that's when I met Ida Smith. I wanted to meet Ida Smith face to face. You know what I mean? I want to meet Ida Smith face to face, get her story, because everyone in the community thought she was just crazy, went off the deep end, and she was really the one that I would say, wow, she's the one that her story, and just because when you find out the hierarchy in her family, I don't know if you know who Franklin Covey is or the Franklin Daytimers. I don't know if you know. No. They're kind of like a day planner, the Franklin Day Planners. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Over here, they're like it's like a scheduling book, that all these top executives around the world would use. There's a whole system of how you would plan your day and you would do this, but it became really, really popular in the 90s. And Ida's brother's the one that invented that.
Oh, is it used by companies so that everyone's sort of synchronized with each other?
Right. So prior to computers and prior to your cell phones, they had a day planner that there's a certain system, and you'd buy it in a year in advance, a whole book that you would carry, and you'd write down your scheduling, your notes, your phone calls, and it was really well thought out of how to plan your day. And they became really, really popular here in Utah. I don't know how popular they were around the world, other than they had people from these big companies, IBM, all these other companies, fly into Utah here to what is called Franklin Covey or Franklin Quest. And they would have these huge seminars, and they became really, really popular. Mm. But, now I got to meet Ida, talk to her face to face, listen to her entire story. God, and everything. Unless somebody spends the time with anybody and really learns and really looks behind the scenes, and really, to be honest, when you look at Christopher, he comes off really brazen on TV or whatever, but he's like that. He can be like that, but really, when you just know him as him, he's the same. And that's the funny thing. He's never been different. He's never been. And I'll be going out there to California in a couple weeks to go and visit with the house that he translated those, the plates at, and talk to those people that know him, that he took care of their son and everything. And the whole thing is, everyone says, well, that's easy because, Christopher tells you to do this or he tells me to do that. And I said, no. This is the thing. Christopher has never asked. Or he's never even asked anything. The show, putting up MWAW TV, that's all been my doing, really. Christopher says, you do what you want to do. You have the free agency to do whatever you want to do. And if I want to sit there and talk bad about it, or if I want, it's just because I always go. I remember when we first started producing the shows, this would never happen. I say, okay, so I always thought we'd get together, plan the show, see what we're going to talk about, do what we're going to do. From the opening to everything, he's stayed out of it completely, 100%. He just says, no, you just bring the show. I'll show up 5 minutes before the show and probably leave a few minutes after. And that's all you'll probably see of me. I'm like, okay. And he's never prepared a show. He's never. I'm sitting there watching how everything's happening, and it's just like, if people could only be in my shoes for a day and see what's going on here when this is happening. I think I will record it. You know what I mean? And I've always recorded our conversations 5 minutes prior to our show and about 5-10 minutes after our show, because he'll talk about a lot of things. You know what I mean? Mm. And I always wanted to keep that, because one day I'll release those, because one day people will actually see his demeanor prior to the show and after the show, and you'll see what he talks about. And he's always consistent, and he always is really adamant about, if I tell you guys something, I have to tell everybody else. I can't be one way or another. And people don't understand. It's like when one person emails me and wants their one question answer, I can't do that. I have to, if they ask me a question, I've got to answer that for everybody. Mm. And so, that's really cool. But if any critics or anyone wanted to say, hey, well, you guys prepared a show, it's like, no, man, if you only knew. And so all I can say till today, I'm pretty like, I see what's going on. I'll continue to do this. My family is LDS. I'm LDS. You know what I mean?
Do I go to church? Still a member of the church?
Oh, I'm still a member of the church. I don't feel like I have to get, excommunicated or talk bad about it.
You still go?
I would still go. You know what I mean? But the only reason why I would still go is to show myself and other people that even though I'm doing this, do I believe the church and certain principles? No, I don't. Unfortunately, I don't anymore. You know what I mean? Mm. I do believe in free agency. I do believe they're trying their best to do what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do I think there's great people? Of course I think there's some great people. Do I think that they have the structure and the infrastructure to change things around? Absolutely. And I think one day, that this infrastructure is going to be set. If things change, they're ready to go. Does that make sense?
You kind of lost me there with the...
Okay. Well, when you really look at all the church holdings, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you really look at on the business side, the church makes around $70 billion a year on properties, on profit, you know what I mean? Not including the tithing. The tithing brings in they were reporting around $7 billion in tithing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the assets for the church continue to grow. They've got if they wanted to provide real help to people in all the different countries at one time, it comes down from the prophet. You know what I mean? Mm. They have that infrastructure. They have the infrastructure for, let's say, a worldwide united foundation in the future. If they allowed it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean? Because they've got the infrastructure, they've got trucks, they've got canning, they've got everything, and that's really what Christopher's trying to point out is not to, because the real truth is when Christopher looks, when you listen to Christopher outside of what he's trying to say, I mean, as a messenger, he's a very harsh messenger. It doesn't matter. He just tells it like it is. But when you listen to Ida Smith, or you listen to Sherry, or even us, he'll never ask you, do you go to church? Do you believe in the church? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do it? Never. And that's what I thought, well, that's very respectable, you know what I mean? Because if someone was to say that, I've heard him say, why do you fight against something that has brought your life and your thing so much joy in the past? Now why are you all of a sudden going to say, oh, I don't like the LDS Church, and oh, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and because you're trying to score brownie points with me? You know what I mean? That you're doing that? You don't have to do that. I never told you to do that. You know what I mean? And I've seen a lot of people kind of get chastised a little bit that way, where they jump on the Christopher bandwagon and start talking bad about the LDS Church. And then behind the scenes, I'll see Christopher shake his head and say, gosh, even the people that are following this message don't get it. You know what I mean? They're not supposed to be following me. They're not supposed to be doing this. They're supposed to be going and living after their own desires, their own heart, and then where he gets really, really uncomfortable is when people come up to him and shake his hand and, oh man, you're Christopher. Oh man, I love what you do. I love it,
Yeah.
I see it, you know what I mean? And he's nice. You would never know that he felt that way, but behind the scenes, just before he goes on to the TV, or he doesn't like having to say his message. He does it because that's what he's supposed to do. But he really doesn't like to make people unhappy or make them. And when someone thinks that they're doing something good, like, I'm going to get excommunicated from my church, or I'm going to not go to church, or I'm not going to do this because Christian is like, I never told you to do that. You continue doing what brings you happiness, and that's basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
He has a message. If he's a messenger, then that's it. But there's too many other things that when you start talking about the brothers. And you start talking about, the so-called three Nephites or John. Are they around this work? All I can say is I've never met them. There's been correspondence that I've seen that has been around for a few people. And
what do you
there's, you know, everyone always doubts that. Oh, is there really a John? Is there really a Nephite? Is there, you know? All I can say is all those things are really weird, and I know that somebody or something else exists that gives Christopher his marching orders. This is not Christopher's work. He doesn't write those books. You know what I mean? He'll write his autobiography, but the Joseph Smith book was not written by him. The sealed portion was not written by him. You know what I mean? There's no way. And this whole court thing, following every single thing in the court and listening to how the courts are, it just brings more and more evidence to Christopher that it just makes him so, like, credible. Like I said, I'm here, I see it, and, you know, the whole key is to give everyone their free agency, put out the message, keep living the life that you want to live, you know what I mean? But read the books, it makes sense, and ask questions, ask the hard questions. When Christopher talks about, I can always tell him at the end of the show, he goes, you know, like, when you ask a question, I say thank you because you ask good questions. And, you know, people that say, you know, well, what about this and this and this, and he's waiting for those people to really ask him questions that would be uncomfortable or questions that you wouldn't think, I don't have the guts to ask him that. He wants those questions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So
basically, the long and short of it is that the show that you're producing, it was pretty much all your idea from the beginning. Like, you're the one that wanted to do it.
This show is my idea. It was never. Christopher will say, well, you know, it was always supposed to happen this way. But, you know, he could always say that, and I would never know, because who knows, you know. All this is really my desire to do this. It's really, in a way, I'm going to tell you, it's a little selfish in a way, because I'm the type of person that needs to be next to somebody or something to see it for myself. You know what I mean? I'm going to travel, I'm going to talk. If someone makes a claim, I'm going to go and see the claim. Like, even going and talking to the people that live out there in San Diego, Christopher has never, ever asked me to go and talk to them. I've talked to Harry DeShack. I've emailed Legion. I've emailed Todd Jumper. All these guys that hate Christopher. At first, you know, they think, oh yeah, well, you know, Tony's just a Christopher guy, you know, trying to infiltrate his way, and you know, I can see that, you know what I mean? But I tell them, no, I have no. I want you to tell me your story. I want you to tell me everything. I want you to tell me what you don't like about him. You know what I mean? And I'll videotape it. I won't edit it. I'll give you a copy so you know that it's not edited. You know what I mean? And you can go put it on the internet, but nobody, not one of these guys will email or write anything down or have a face-to-face conversation. They don't want it recorded. You know what I mean? But yet Christopher's the only one that will record everything. Yeah. And that makes you wonder again. It's like, what? You're going to record everything that he does, even though. And there's been other things that he's recorded, like in private, that I have that he's going to release at a certain time for everybody else. You know what I mean? And when he does, it's just going to fill in those pieces of the puzzle to other people around the world. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things where unless you're here, unless you see it, unless you experience it, it's totally odd. It's just something I've never experienced or have seen before. You know? You know what's interesting is the people that call you, these people that call, sometimes when I switch the camera to certain things, it's like he already knows who's going to call when they call.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? Yeah. He'll make like little gestures like, there he is, you know, or this, here comes this person, and it's just,
it's like we asked him the question when he was asleep, so we'd be prepared with an answer.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, that's the impression I get, because when I'm sitting there and people are calling and then that question comes into... You see how some of those questions come in and they're just appropriate at the appropriate times? It's just odd. It's just weird. I don't know how it works out. I don't know how it is. I mean, one day he was like, I mean, and that's why I keep those odd moments and I record them. Because unless you're sitting there in the studio where we are, you wouldn't see that. You know what I mean? And I'm going to put all those together and leave them there. And all the conversations he has, even about this person and that person and anything, because I don't think anything he ever says, either he checks himself really well with whoever he talks to or he's the same guy. And everybody that's known him throughout the whole entire time all says he's the same guy. You know what I mean? No, but you know, he might act like a goofball or whatever, but I know deep down when he's uncomfortable around people because, like he said, he would know who you really were or I really were, and you know, he has to deal with both realms.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
that's all I can say. That's my journey. You know what I mean? And my journey is just really with the books, seeing how Christopher is in you know, outside the cameras, seeing his, you know, meeting him for the first time and everything, and seeing how he relates and deals with people. It's like, you know, one of the nicest guys you'll probably ever meet, and probably one of the most really steady guys. You know? That's why it's so incredible to see someone get so afraid and say, that's Satan, that's Lucifer, that's one of the devil's helpers there, man, there's no way. And I'm like, well, if it is, I don't see any problem with the message. You know, it aligns with my beliefs in Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, you know what I mean, everything I was raised with, really. And it answers the questions about inequality, the women in the priesthood, the blacks, you know what I mean, polygamy. It answers all those questions also. So what can I say, you know?
Have you read all the books already?
Yes, I've read all the books. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I have to continually go back and read the books because all of a sudden it's like, gosh, I mean, I forget as fast as I just remember the feeling as I'm reading the books. Every time I read the books, as you're reading one page or another page, you just, in your mind, you just say, wow, this is wow, you know? And I want to take a pen and mark that, but then I end up marking the whole book, you know what I mean? Because every single page is like, wait, how can I find something on this top, you know what I mean? That's what drives me nuts, you know what I mean? And so, reading the Joseph Smith book or one of these books, there's so many good things in it that I don't know where to begin, you know?
Well, it's 2:30 in the morning here, so...
Oh, man, I'll let you go, my man.
Go to bed.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you this now. When you first started telling your story, I could tell it was going to take a while, and you told the story, so I hit record, and I've actually recorded most of that in case you ever want to use it.
Oh, no, that's great. I appreciate it. No, that's awesome.
You know, if someone wants to hear Tony's story...
Yo, that's great. That's good. That is great.
I thought I'd tell you now, in case anyone does ever listen to it, they will know that you didn't know that you were being recorded. And saying was genuine.
Yeah, that's genuine. That's great.
Anyway, that was fascinating to hear, and we'll definitely have to catch up again.